Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we distill complex information into key insights, custom tailored for you. Today, we're embarking on an exploration of what a fascinating body of source material describes as nothing less than a fundamental reset for human civilization. We're examining a pivotal juncture, a fork in the road that these sources argue isn't about, traditional political battles, but a deeper choice between what they call an age of fear, defined by hoarding, competition, and violence, and an age of abundance defined by dignity, purpose, and peace.
It's truly a profound perspective, isn't it? It highlights a core paradox of our time. For millennia, traditional economics has been rooted in scarcity, the idea of finite resources meeting infinite human wants. That was the foundational premise. But these sources suggest that exponential technological progress is now engineering scarcity right out of existence. They even point to concepts like Elon Musk's universal high income as a tangible illustration, a future where extreme productivity could render poverty, as we know it, obsolete.
Right. The very notion that basic needs could be met for everyone with negligible effort, that fundamentally reshapes our understanding of society.
It really does.
And to navigate this monumental shift, our sources introduce a comprehensive framework they term Kalkiism. They present it as an economic and spiritual blueprint for an age of abundance, one they state is inspired by ancient scripture, powered by modern technology, and grounded in post-scarcity economics. This isn't just a minor adjustment to our current systems, is it?
Oh, not at all. This framework proposes a fundamental resetting, not just, a reformation of how we operate as a species.
Yeah.
Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this visionary blueprint, exploring how it suggests aligning technology with ethics, economy with ecology, and even mind with spirit. And it's all drawn directly from the extensive material we've gathered. It's a bold set of claims, definitely. But the evidence presented by the sources suggests we're already experiencing the initial phases of this shift, whether we consciously recognize it or not.
Okay, so let's begin by exploring the dawn of abundance, beyond the scarcity paradigm. For most of human history, scarcity wasn't just an economic theory. It was a harsh, daily reality. It dictated everything, really.
That's right. Scarcity was the pervasive foundational assumption for millennia. And you can see how it shaped societies. Limited resources versus infinite human wants created the conditions for competition, hierarchies, labor markets, and that relentless drive for profit that defined capitalism. In its historical context, capitalism was incredibly effective at optimizing those scarce resources. It drove innovation, generated material wealth.
Right. It lifted billions out of agrarian poverty into industrial societies. It certainly excelled at rewarding risk and leveraging talent, which was crucial for that era.
No doubt.
But the sources we're analyzing make a rather provocative claim here. They suggest scarcity, at least in its traditional sense, is no longer natural. They argue it's engineered or even a political choice. What exactly do they mean by that in today's world?
Well, the sources provide concrete examples to challenge the notion of inherent scarcity today. They point out that, quote, a single solar panel can power a home. A single 3D printer can build a village. An AI model can write books, diagnose illness, and run entire businesses. We see drones delivering packages, robots assembling cars, blockchain transferring value without banks. Large language models can translate entire books in seconds. The critical insight here, according to these sources, is that the marginal cost of replication of digital goods, designs, knowledge is nearly zero.
Nearly zero. That's a truly revolutionary shift in economic potential.
It really is.
So if the cost of making more of something is virtually zero, why do we still see so many people struggling for basic needs like food, shelter, healthcare?
And this is where the concept of engineered scarcity comes into play. The sources assert that scarcity is now a political choice, artificially maintained through mechanisms like paywalls, patents, borders, licenses, and rent-seeking structures. These aren't natural limitations, they're human-imposed barriers. They restrict access to what could otherwise be abundant resources and services. This perspective suggests that we possess the technical capability to provide for everyone's basic needs, but our current systems, well, they often choose not to, prioritizing different incentives.
And this leads directly to what the sources term the lie of infinite growth. Traditional capitalism, as we know it, requires endless growth, constant increases in GDP, quarterly gains, continuous expansion. But if abundance is truly within reach, does that relentless pursuit of growth still make sense?
According to these sources, it becomes fundamentally absurd.
Yeah.
When basic needs are met for everyone, the relentless pursuit of more GDP or endless quarterly gains becomes, well, pointless. They introduce a concept they call the Plateau of Plenty, envisioning a world where traditional growth metrics become meaningless because Simply put, you don't need more when you already have enough.
Right.
To illustrate this, they offer a vivid analogy. It's like asking a person to consume 3 lunches a day. Pointless, gluttonous, and unhealthy. It highlights this fundamental disconnect between our existing economic system, designed for an uphill climb, and a future where humanity finds itself on a wide, fertile plain.
So the shift isn't about fearing stagnation, but rather embracing a new kind of freedom, a different kind of well-being.
Precisely. The goal, according to the sources, shifts from an anxious striving for growth to embracing sufficiency and liberation from drudgery. The key insight is that true prosperity isn't about endless accumulation. It's about the security and freedom that comes from having what you need. That allows you to focus on deeper human pursuits like purpose, belonging, self-actualization, rather than just being trapped in a cycle of survival.
Okay, so if these foundational assumptions are indeed breaking down, what do our sources suggest is the next logical step for our existing ideologies? They propose this signals the failure of ideology itself, suggesting that clinging to old paradigms like capitalism, socialism, or communism is dangerous. That's a strong word.
It is strong, but they argue it's dangerous because, as the sources state, none of these paradigms were designed for a world where machines can grow food, build homes, diagnose disease, educate children, and even guide spiritual practice. They're all, in their essence, rooted in a scarcity mindset. Instead, the sources advocate for a pragmatic approach, asking, what system does the data support? It frames the path forward as an evidence-based design challenge rather than an ideological battle.
And what does that data, according to these sources, consistently tell us about human flourishing? What actually works?
The data, they claim, consistently shows that societies thrive when they prioritize security, purpose, belonging, equity, and transparency. These are presented as the measurable indicators of genuine human flourishing, quite different from abstract ideological theories. So the path forward is described not as more ideological revolutions, but as a conscious evolution, a deliberate design of systems that demonstrably work for human well-being, rather than trying to force people into outdated molds.
This brings us neatly to exponential everything, the engine of post-scarcity. We've touched on it, but it's really the core driver here. When the sources refer to a nonlinear world, what's the fundamental difference between linear and exponential growth? It's easy to get confused.
Oh, definitely. And the difference is profound, often counterintuitive to our linear human minds. Linear growth is simple addition. You add a fixed amount each time, like getting an extra $1,000 every year. Exponential growth, however, involves doubling. 2 becomes 4, becomes 8, 16, and so on. At first, the increases seem small, almost negligible, right? But then they just explode with dizzying speed.
Like the classic chessboard and the grains of rice analogy.
Exactly. 1 grain on the first square, 2 on the second, 4 on the third. By the time you get to the 64th square, you'd have more rice than the Earth could produce in thousands of years. And the sources explicitly state, we are now in the second half, implying we are past the subtle beginnings and well into the explosive, almost overwhelming phase of change.
And while Moore's law is famously tied to computation, our sources stress that almost every major technological field is now on an exponential curve. So this isn't just about faster computers then.
No, it's far broader. And crucially, it's the convergence of these technologies, rather than their individual advancements, that the sources identify as the true catalyst for this proposed post-scarcity civilization.
Should we dig into some of these key exponential domains and their claimed impact?
Yeah, let's do that. Starting with computation, or AI. It's astounding how rapidly this field is evolving. What's the impact of AI, as presented in the sources, on our world?
Well, the sources highlight how advanced AI, specifically mentioning systems like GPT-4 and whatever comes next, can write essays, generate code, draft legal briefs, create music, and simulate conversations at near-human levels. It's quite remarkable. They also note AI's capacity to diagnose diseases, analyze legal contracts, tutor children, and manage complex logistics systems with no human oversight. This isn't just basic automation, it's described as cognitive outsourcing.
Cognitive outsourcing. Wow. Yeah, leading to a significant decrease in the need for traditional human labor across many sectors. The implications for employment and the economy as we know it are just staggering. The power here lies in these neural networks learning from massive data sets, allowing them to generate incredibly complex and contextually relevant outputs.
And that leads right into energy, which the sources describe as the rise of infant power. We're talking about solar energy's 90% plus cost reduction, incredible battery improvements, even breakthroughs in nuclear fusion. What's the central takeaway here?
The central takeaway is that when energy is abundant, almost everything else becomes abundant too. It's fundamental, Energy is civilization's building block. When it becomes clean, cheap, and virtually limitless, the sources argue it revolutionizes transportation, manufacturing, water purification, communication, pretty much everything. It transforms the cost structure of nearly everything. The vision of clean, abundant energy is no longer presented as utopian. It's portrayed as practical and actively being realized.
Then there's food and agriculture. They discuss vertical farming using 95% less water, lab-grown meat, and AI and robotics automating agricultural processes. This paints a picture of potentially eliminating hunger, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The sources invite us to imagine a city where skyscrapers grow vegetables, meat is brewed like beer, and food miles become food steps, a concept already being piloted in places like Singapore and the UAE. These technologies, they claim, can fundamentally transform food security from a persistent global challenge into, well, a non-issue. The elimination of hunger, an ancient human curse, becomes technically feasible through these innovations.
And manufacturing and materials with the rise of 3D printing, we're seeing claims of entire homes built in 24 hours for under $10,000 and even bioprinters for tissues and organs. How do these advancements impact our current systems?
These developments, the sources argue, fundamentally decentralize wealth creation and render traditional global supply chains radically obsolete. I mean, when you can print a home or a replacement part in your local microfactory using recycled materials, the need for distant factories or complex global logistics just diminishes significantly. This shifts production to being local, on-demand, highly customized, effectively putting power and resources back into communities. The power of 3D printing lies in that additive manufacturing, building objects layer by layer from digital designs.
Next up, communication. AI translation, real-time subtitles, ultra-fast satellite internet like Starlink are eliminating the last barriers to global connectivity. The social and political implications must be immense.
Oh, indeed. The sources posit that this means global collaboration at the level of the individual becomes possible. When everyone can communicate instantly across languages and borders, it dismantles the economic, educational, and cultural logic of traditional national boundaries. It suggests a leveling of the playing field for billions previously excluded from global conversations and fosters unprecedented connectivity.
In biology and health, we're seeing advances like genome sequencing for under $100, CRISPR gene editing, mRNA, vaccine platforms. The sources envision a future where disease becomes optional and aging itself may become a manageable condition. That's mind-bending.
It is. The sources suggest these advancements shift healthcare from reactive sick care to predictive and preventive health. Treatments could become hyper-tailored to an individual's specific genome, and the very concepts of chronic disease or even aging could be profoundly transformed. The economic consequences for healthcare industries, insurance systems, even intergenerational relationships would be absolutely staggering.
Let's turn to governance and coordination. Digital systems like Estonia's e-residency and the principles of blockchain are enabling transparent, citizen-centric governance. How does this change the fundamental nature of government?
Well, the sources envision a future where governance becomes a service, not a power structure. That's the key phrase. It moves from slow, bureaucratic systems to responsive, data-driven, citizen-centric processes. Imagine securely voting from your phone, getting real-time feedback on government performance, participating in decentralized decision-making with high transparency. This, they argue, fosters greater trust and efficiency. I mean, the underlying principle of blockchain, for instance, is a decentralized, immutable ledger verifying transactions without intermediaries that offers a whole new model for trust.
And money and value. Decentralized finance, DeFi, cryptocurrencies, DAOs. The sources propose that money may fade as a medium of exchange. That's a truly monumental idea.
It is, absolutely. These technologies, the sources claim, shift power from banks to protocols, from elites to communities. They enable borderless, permissionless transfers and automate transactions in ways never before possible. In a truly post-scarcity world where basic needs are met with negligible cost, the role of money as a primary medium of exchange could diminish. It might be replaced by systems based on access, contribution, and trust.
Now, perhaps the most overlooked exponential domain, according to our sources, consciousness and inner technology. Neurotech, meditation apps becoming mainstream, brain-computer interfaces like Neuralink. What does this mean for us?
It suggests that just as external technology empowers us, our inner technology, our consciousness itself, is also maturing at an exponential pace. More people are awakening to mindfulness, spiritual literacy. The sources envision a future of wiser humans. And this domain is presented as crucial for navigating the profound psychological impact of all these other exponential changes. It offers tools for inner resilience, for clarity.
Because the true power, as the sources explain, lies not in individual technologies, but their convergence. What does this convergence mean for the old scarcity engine?
It means it becomes obsolete, that's the claim. When AI can design new materials and 3D printers can fabricate them using solar energy delivered by autonomous vehicles coordinated by blockchain, all within communities perhaps practicing collective meditation, the entire old logic just breaks down. The sources claim you don't need employment if machines produce everything, you don't need growth if sufficiency is everywhere, and you don't need war if energy is free and food is abundant.
Yeah.
The entire scaffolding of the scarcity-driven world, they argue, simply crumbles under the weight of this convergence.
But this immense exponential change also creates a psychological shock. The sources acknowledge that it can produce chaos, inequality can worsen, power can concentrate, systems can break. So it's not a guaranteed utopia then.
Not without a conscious framework, no. Humans are innately wired for linear environments, right? So this exponential acceleration can be incredibly disorienting. This is why, according to the sources, we see increasing anxiety and feelings of being overwhelmed in society. This psychological impact is precisely why they emphasize that we need not just tools, but wisdom. A guiding philosophy, they claim, is essential to navigate this profound disruption ethically and effectively.
And that, as we understand it, is where Kalkiism steps in, positioning itself as the operating system for an exponential civilization.
Exactly. This framework is presented as uniquely suited to align these rapid changes, balancing the speed and scale of technological progress with spiritual grounding. It aims to channel technology toward dignity and service, actively seeking to prevent potential dystopic outcomes by centering wisdom and ethical principles in its design. It's posited as the critical synthesis that can bridge the gap between technological possibility and true human flourishing.
This brings us to the Plateau of Plenty, living in sufficiency. I'm drawn to the vivid image our sources use, reaching a wide, fertile plateau after a lifelong mountain climb. The question shifts from how to keep climbing to how to live. It's such a powerful metaphor for our current moment, isn't it?
It beautifully captures the essence of this proposed civilizational shift. It really does. For millennia, humanity's story has indeed been one of relentless striving against scarcity. The mountain climb symbolizes that arduous journey: agriculture, empires, science, industrialization. But now, for the first time in recorded history, the sources suggest we've reached a point where basic needs can be met for all, and the very skills and systems that got us here are no longer adequate for what lies ahead on this plateau.
And what exactly is the definition of this Plateau of Plenty in the context of our source material?
It's defined as a civilizational condition where basic human needs, food, energy, shelter, education, healthcare, safety, communication, are met for everyone with negligible marginal cost. This condition, the sources argue, is made possible by the convergence of exponential tech, networked intelligence, radical efficiency, and global collaboration. In this proposed state, abundance isn't merely aspirational, it's structural. It's inherent to the system.
So on this plateau, traditional growth metrics like GDP become largely meaningless. The concept of enough becomes the new optimum.
That's precisely what the sources propose. They argue that GDP growth, which has been a moral imperative for centuries, becomes an absurd and unhealthy addiction when fundamental needs are universally met. Why would a society endlessly increase production when everyone already has what they truly need? The shift, they claim, is profound. From a constant fear-driven striving for more to a state of being where sufficiency enables liberation from drudgery and allows for deeper human pursuits. It's kind of like a civilization moving from a perpetually striving adolescence into a mature, stable adulthood.
This naturally leads to the end of work as we know it. If machines are producing virtually everything, what does that mean for human labor and our traditional understanding of a job?
Well, the sources explicitly state that automation and AI will make most traditional human activity optional, potentially replacing millions of jobs across every sector: manufacturing, law, even medicine. They envision a world where machines manage farming, construction, cleaning, transport, complex calculations, while AI agents handle writing, design, advisory roles. While there will certainly still be meaningful tasks and contributions, the concept of a job in the traditional sense tied to survival is seen as fundamentally changing. It redefines our relationship with labor entirely.
So contribution is then measured not by output, but by presence, curiosity, creativity, and care. That's a truly radical redefinition of human value, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I mean, for millennia, human identity has been deeply tied to work, productivity, economic utility. The Plateau of Plenty, as described in these sources, dissolves that direct link. It creates an imperative to redefine human worth beyond mere economic function. It's about valuing what truly makes us human, our inherent capacity for wisdom, compassion, authentic connection.
And if that's the case, then we're talking about nothing less than the death of the scarcity economy, with capitalism's core assumptions breaking down.
That's correct. Capitalism's brilliance, as the sources acknowledge, lies in its efficiency at allocating scarce resources. However, they argue it relies on three core assumptions: infinite human wants, limited resources, and the necessity of human labor. On the plateau, all three of these assumptions, they claim, break down. Human wants eventually plateau when needs are met. Resources become effectively abundant through technology, and human labor becomes optional. When these foundational assumptions fail, capitalism's underlying logic, they conclude, unravels.
So profit loses its driving meaning, and private ownership of essentials becomes pathological. How does this fundamentally shift the economic foundation?
When abundance is universal, profit, as a primary driving force, loses its imperative. And the private ownership of essentials like water, energy, housing is viewed as an unjust hoarding of what should be a universal birthright. The sources explain that a new economy must be built on access, participation, and stewardship, rather than the accumulation and extraction that define traditional capitalism. They frame this not as capitalism being inherently evil, but simply as an obsolete system for this new reality of plenty.
But this proposed transition isn't just structural. The sources acknowledge it creates a psychological abyss. If identity has been deeply tied to survival and struggle, what happens when those drivers are removed?
It can indeed create a profound existential vacuum. Oh, yeah. The sources suggest that many individuals might experience anxiety, depression, nostalgia for the good old days of struggle, or even gravitate towards technophobia and extremist ideologies, seeking to reintroduce drama and purpose into their lives. The psychological challenge is profound. It requires new narratives, new myths, new sources of meaning to fill that void.
And this is where spirituality, art, and community become crucial, helping people learn not how to compete, but how to be free. This sounds like it would naturally lead to a rise of stillness.
It is, and it's presented as one of the more counterintuitive truths of the Plateau of Plenty. In the industrial era, movement, scaling, constant activity often define success. But on the plateau, with no inherent need to chase profit or fear lack, a culture of slowness, reflection, and depth is envisioned to emerge. The sources state, stillness is not idleness, it is presence. And in a very real way, they note that the plateau becomes a kind of spiritual infrastructure, making inner awakening universally accessible as external pressures diminish.
But abundance, as the sources emphasize, isn't automatically utopian. They point to an ethical challenge of abundance where it could, unchecked, lead to new pathologies like hoarding or technological addiction.
That's why the Kalkiist framework is presented as essential.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Without an ethical compass, abundance could devolve into gluttony or apathy. This framework, the sources claim, provides the moral architecture. It teaches gratitude over greed, sufficiency over status, presence over performance, and service over selfishness. It aims to ensure that abundance is wielded with grace and wisdom.
If GDP is no longer the goal, how do the sources propose we measure success on this plateau of plenty? What are the new metrics?
The sources propose new metrics that extend far beyond GDP. They suggest looking at well-being indices encompassing health, happiness, mental clarity, ecological harmony covering biodiversity and regeneration, social cohesion measured by trust and participation, and spiritual flourishing indicated by a sense of purpose and interconnectedness. These aren't just soft metrics. They are framed as the real indicators of a thriving society. Imagine a national dashboard tracking collective wisdom, kindness, beauty.
This has profound global implications. The sources suggest that developing nations may actually leapfrog directly to the plateau, skipping the exploitative industrial phase entirely. Nepal, specifically, is positioned as a potential soft superpower of the spirit, and even the first peace nation.
This changes the geopolitical landscape fundamentally. Absolutely. In this proposed future, war becomes irrational, colonial models collapse, national debt becomes largely meaningless when abundance is shared. Nepal, with its rich spiritual tradition and history of resilience, is presented as the ideal pilot. It could demonstrate that such a leap is truly possible, transforming it into a beacon of partnership and spiritual leadership rather than an object of domination.
So this plateau of plenty isn't just something that automatically arrives. The sources state it must be designed by preparing for the plateau through policy shifts, education reform, spiritual revival, cultural innovation, essentially helping people decondition from scarcity.
Exactly. It's presented as a comprehensive design project aimed at shifting our collective psychology away from millennia of scarcity-driven thinking. This includes moving from national growth targets to well-being, teaching curiosity instead of compliance in education, and transforming economics from a jobs-based system to one of universal access and contribution. It's framed as the great conscious work of our time.
Let's shift our focus now to capitalism's final limit and beyond. Our sources acknowledge capitalism's historical genius in solving scarcity, but they also clarify its fundamental blind spot. They suggest it becomes dysfunctional and sometimes even cruel in an age of abundance.
Capitalism's brilliance, as the sources explain, lay in its efficiency in allocating scarce resources. It incentivized innovation, created immense material wealth, no question. However, the sources argue that this very design, so effective in a world defined by scarcity, becomes perverse and self-defeating when abundance is genuinely possible. Its core mechanisms, private ownership, competition, the profit motive are, they claim, fundamentally misaligned with a future of plenty.
And this is because, as the sources contend, the foundations of capitalism are dissolving. How are its three core conditions, scarcity, competition, and growth, failing in this new context?
Well, the sources argue that scarcity, capitalism's cornerstone, is now being engineered out of existence by technology. Competition, while driving efficiency, also breeds exploitation and monopoly, becoming counterproductive when basic resources are abundant. And growth, once a necessity for progress, transforms into an absurd and unhealthy addiction on the proposed Plateau of Plenty. When these foundational assumptions fail, the sources conclude, capitalism's underlying logic just unravels.
And we are, according to these sources, already seeing these cracks appearing throughout the system. Let's start with the environmental limit.
Yeah, the sources explain that capitalism has historically externalized environmental costs, treating pollution and resource depletion as mere externalities, side effects not accounted for in market prices. However, they emphasize that ecological collapse is not an externality, but an existential threat that undermines the very existence of the system. Growth has limits, they stress, and we are currently breaching them, demonstrating capitalism's fundamental unsustainability on a finite planet.
Then there's the automation paradox.
This is identified as a critical crack. Automation increases productivity and lowers costs, which sounds great for a capitalist system. But in a labor-based income system, it also inherently eliminates jobs. If people don't work, they can't earn income. If they can't earn income, they can't consume, which then threatens the very consumer demand that capitalism relies upon. The sources highlight that AI can now write, code, create art, manage operations, making human labor increasingly unnecessary and, under the current system, potentially leading to widespread unemployment and social unrest.
And the inequality machine.
Wealth concentration, whether through inheritance, monopolies, or political capture, is now described by the sources as a function of structure, rather than solely a result of individual effort or merit. In a world with the technical potential for universal abundance, they argue it becomes perverse for trillions to be hoarded by a few, while billions lack basic necessities. This structural inequality, they claim, undermines the very legitimacy of the system.
Finally, the attention economy and spiritual exhaustion.
The sources claim that capitalism, particularly through platforms like social media, advertising, entertainment, has fundamentally colonized our attention, monetizing our dopamine and engagement. This, they argue, actively creates anxious, distracted, and spiritually starved populations, contributing to rising rates of depression, addiction, loneliness. They suggest capitalism cannot fix this because this is not a bug, it is a feature. If people were truly content, they'd consume less, which directly undermines the imperative for perpetual growth.
So the sources present this as truly capitalism versus abundance, a contradiction in terms. How does zero marginal cost destroy profit?
Well, when digital goods, music, books, software, AI services can be copied infinitely at virtually zero cost, the traditional idea of scarcity just collapses. The price of these goods naturally approaches zero, and the potential for profit evaporates. Companies, the sources argue, then attempt to enclose abundance through artificial means like paywalls or patents, but they view this as a defensive posture, a kind of last gasp against an inevitable shift.
And they suggest that when essentials become virtually free, Universal access makes ownership obsolete.
Yes, if fundamental necessities like energy, mobility, education, healthcare can be accessed by all without labor or significant cost, then private ownership of these becomes increasingly irrelevant. Why own a car if autonomous fleets are free and ubiquitous? Why strive to own a house if abundant modular housing is available to all? The sources argue that capitalism's inherent DNA, based on property and transaction, simply cannot process this fundamental shift in value.
This sounds like it completely flips the script from valuing consumption to prioritizing contribution over consumption.
Exactly. In these proposed abundance economies, the sources claim that value is inherently placed on contribution, creativity, presence, and care above mere consumption. The societal goal shifts from accumulating more material possessions to living more meaningfully. In such a world, the most respected person might be defined by their wisdom, compassion, or joy, rather than their material wealth. This, they assert, turns the traditional capitalist consumer model upside down.
To maintain itself, the sources argue that capitalism relies on certain mythologies that sustain capitalism, which they call dangerous delusions. What are these myths?
These include what they call the meritocracy myth, the idea that success is purely a result of individual talent and effort, ignoring systemic biases, privilege, luck. Then there's the invisible hand, the belief that unregulated markets naturally optimize for the common good, despite clear evidence of monopolies, environmental disaster, persistent inequality. The work ethic is also critiqued, the notion that idleness is sinful or unproductive, even if advanced systems can provide for everyone's needs. And finally, infinite growth, the mathematically impossible idea that resources and human desires can endlessly expand on a finite planet. These myths, while perhaps once useful, are now seen as actively harmful.
This all leads to the transition dilemma, why capitalism cannot reform itself. It seems inherently resistant to fundamental change, doesn't it?
It does, according to the sources. They explain that capitalism is a complex adaptive system that strongly resists reform due to several factors. Political capture by entrenched corporate interests, a deep cultural identity where it's equated with freedom itself, path dependency, where entire industries and ways of life are built upon its continuation, and a profound fear of alternatives, often stemming from memories of failed socialist experiments. Their conclusion is stark. Capitalism cannot evolve into post-scarcity economics. It must be superseded.
So, if left unchecked, the sources warn that capitalism doesn't just collapse, it mutates into what they call neo-feudalism. What does that vision entail?
The sources paint a pretty grim picture of digital feudalism, yeah. They envision tech monopolies becoming digital lords overseeing platform serfs, working gig jobs with no real rights or security. Surveillance capitalism would track every move, digital currencies controlled by powerful corporations, basic income offered merely as a pacifier, not true empowerment or dignity. This scenario, while not presented as inevitable, is offered as a likely outcome if there isn't a conscious pivot towards a new paradigm.
And that pivot, they suggest, is Kalkiism, which is presented as something beyond capitalism. Our sources state is not a return to socialism, not communism rebranded, but a new paradigm entirely.
That's correct. This framework, they explain, is rooted in abundance, enabled by exponential technology, and aligned with what they term spiritual truth. Its core principles include universal access to essentials as a birthright, decentralized production via open-source tools and AI, spiritual literacy as a fundamental pillar of culture, a contribution economy where gifts are offered freely, collective governance through transparent tech-enabled systems, and a sacred ecology where nature is revered as a partner. Kalkiism, in this view, sees abundance as a platform for awakening, building institutions around presence, not profit, around trust, not transaction.
It sounds like it introduces a concept of spiritual economics.
It certainly does. Kalkiist economics, as described in the sources, integrates concepts like silence as productivity, kindness as currency, wisdom as value, and beauty as infrastructure. In this framework, your worth is measured not by income, but by how you uplift others. It's presented as a post-capitalist realism that fundamentally prioritizes meaning, connection, and well-being over mere accumulation of material wealth.
The sources suggest the tipping point is near. They claim we're technologically ready, economically primed, and spiritually awakening. So the only remaining obstacle is narrative.
That's their core argument. The obstacle, they claim, is indeed the stories we continue to tell ourselves about scarcity, competition, hierarchy. The tipping point, they suggest, arrives when enough people realize they no longer need to compete to live, to obey to belong, to work to be worthy. When that fundamental shift in collective consciousness occurs, they argue the old system will naturally dissolve, like water finding its own level.
So in conclusion for this section, the sources propose that the gift of limits is that capitalism's final limit is actually its fulfillment. We are asked to thank it, and then we transcend it.
Yes, the sources suggest that capitalism served its purpose by bringing us to this point of potential abundance, but it simply cannot take us further. It's time, they claim, to move into a world where abundance is shared, economics is described as a dance of service, labor is freely offered, and value is not money, but meaning. This is the world Kalkiism aims to birth.
Let's move into a deep dive on data, not dogma, reprogramming civilization. Our sources pose a fascinating paradox of information. Despite unprecedented access to data, they argue our institutions remain bound by obsolete ideologies, which they call a bottleneck to an abundant civilization.
It's a critical observation. We are, as they explain, swimming in data satellites, sensors, AI models, wearables meaning, as they put it. We no longer have to guess. We can know.
Yeah.
Yet our decision-making systems, whether in economics, politics, education, or religion, are still largely governed by fixed beliefs that resist falsification. This ideological rigidity, they claim, prevents us from adapting effectively to a complex, dynamic, nonlinear world, creating a severe bottleneck for true progress.
So what is dogma then in this context, according to the sources?
Dogma is defined as a belief system that resists falsification, evolution, or contextualization. It claims truth not by evidence, but by authority or tradition. Historically, the sources explain, it served to organize behavior when data was scarce. Useful, perhaps. However, in a data-rich world, these adaptive scaffolding structures have, they argue, hardened into control mechanisms, becoming actively dangerous because they blind us to emerging truths and complexities.
This implies that ideologies are limited algorithms.
Exactly. The sources suggest thinking of ideologies as compressed sets of rules, like algorithms, that worked effectively within specific historical environments. Capitalism, socialism, nationalism, they all have a defined rule set, but none, they claim, scale universally or across all emergent technologies. The sources warn you are using candlelight to navigate space travel if you attempt to govern a post-scarcity civilization with 19th century ideologies. They assert that such ideologies become parodies of themselves when rigidly applying to a fundamentally changed reality.
This also, they argue, explains the failure of ideological institutions across various domains. In economics, for instance, it still clings to growth models, ignoring well-being, automation, and critical supply-side issues.
Right. Mainstream economics, they claim, continues to prioritize GDP targets over holistic well-being, largely ignores the profound impact of automation on labor markets, and often dismisses fundamental supply-side issues in inflation debates. There's little room, they contend, to ask questions like, what if growth is not the goal? What if abundance is already here? This ideological adherence, they conclude, prevents effective adaptation to new economic realities.
And in politics, it's still largely dominated by what they call a false binary of left versus right, with, as they put it, no mainstream party running on end scarcity, liberate humans, optimize joy.
It's a stark observation. The sources suggest that both traditional political poles often serve corporate interests and perpetuate centralized power structures, fearing genuine transparency. The systems, they claim, are designed for division and control, rather than for the holistic liberation and well-being that their data suggests societies truly need.
What about education, then?
Our current education systems, according to the sources, still largely focus on rote memorization and obedience, designed for an industrial labor force. They pose the question, where is emotional intelligence, ecological systems thinking, or AI ethics in the core curriculum? They argue that it's not effectively teaching children to think in networks and adapt to a nonlinear world, which is what's truly needed for the future.
Even religion isn't immune from these critiques.
While acknowledging faith's capacity to offer strength and meaning, the sources argue that many religious institutions cling to doctrines that resist scientific insight, interfaith dialogue, or gender equality. The sacred, they claim, need not be dogmatic, but dogmatic structures often impede true spiritual evolution and prevent adaptation to new knowledge or understanding.
But the tide is turning. The age of data has arrived, they declare. It's exciting to think that we no longer have to guess, we can know.
It's presented as a transformative shift. Pervasive data from satellites, sensors, AI models, wearables means we can observe, model, verify phenomena at an unprecedented scale. Policies, they claim, can be evaluated by their actual impact rather than mere ideological conformity. Systems can become self-correcting. Governance can be genuinely transparent. It's about moving from "we believe this works" to "we measured what works."
So if the data is there, why aren't we consistently using it? What do the sources identify as the blockers to data utilization?
The sources identify several key reasons. Power inertia, where entrenched elites benefit from confusion and resist transparency. Cultural attachment, as people are loyal to their identities and narratives over objective outcomes, resisting admitting old systems are failing. Emotional simplicity, because ideology often offers clear heroes and villains, while data presents nuance and complexity. And institutional lag, where existing systems are optimized for past conditions and resist the perceived risk of updating. They conclude that these are ultimately symptoms of fear, which, once named, can potentially be transmuted.
This brings us to a beautiful concept introduced by the sources. From dogma to dharma. There's a powerful spiritual parallel here, isn't there?
Yes. In spiritual traditions, dogma is often understood as rigid belief. Dharma, by contrast, means right action based on truth, timing, and alignment with the whole. Kalkiism, drawing from this, suggests a move from fixed commandments to living insight. In a truly data-driven society, they claim, truth is not what you inherit. It is what you observe in stillness, test in reality, and refine in humility. It is presented as a spiritual upgrade for the AI age.
So how do these sources propose designing data-driven systems within the Kalkiist model? In governance, for example.
Kalki's governance, they envision, would involve policies being piloted in test zones, outcomes transparently measured, citizen feedback collected through secure digital tools. Bad policies would be retired, effective ones scaled. Government in this model becomes like a garden, not a factory, responsive, adaptive, evolving based on real-world impact.
And for economics in this model.
Instead of solely tracking GDP, new metrics would be tracked. Mental health, ecological regeneration, collective wisdom, learning velocity, social inclusion. Universal basic infrastructure would be guaranteed. People would contribute based on their innate talents and callings. The economy, they argue, transforms from a relentless treadmill into a vibrant canvas, fostering creativity and collective well-being. How does this apply to education? Learning would become AI-assisted, self-paced, community-rooted. Each learner, they suggest, might have a dashboard tracking their curiosity patterns, emotional states. The goal shifts from grades and memorization to growth, wonder, insight, nurturing true understanding and the capacity for critical thought.
And surprisingly, even spirituality can be data-driven in this framework.
Yes, sacred practices, the sources propose, would be evaluated not just by tradition or belief, but by their measurable impact on compassion, attention stability, embodied awareness, ethical action. It's where, as they put it, neuroscience meets mysticism, and spiritual ritual becomes a form of collective research into human flourishing.
This sounds like it assigns a powerful and transformative role to AI, moving it from ideology to intelligence.
The sources emphasize that AI is not neutral. It inherently reflects the values embedded in its design. Kalkiist societies, they suggest, would use AI as a moral compass, optimizing for collective well-being, emotional coherence, ecological balance, truthfulness. AI in this vision becomes the nervous system of an awakened civilization, guided by the principles of Dharma.
But there's an essential ethical core here, data with dignity. We must never let data dehumanize.
Absolutely. Kalkiism, according to the sources, insists that consent is sacred, data is a commons, privacy is a right, and human intuition complements machine logic. The future they describe is explicitly not technocratic. It is human-centered. Data in this model is designed and used to liberate, not to dominate or control.
And this all matters now. The tipping point is upon us due to escalating climate issues, widespread societal distrust, and technology outpacing ethics.
The sources warn that if we don't consciously shift from ideology to data-driven intelligence, we face accelerating civil unrest, digital authoritarianism, eco-collapse, mass societal depression. But if we do, they suggest we can unlock post-scarcity prosperity, participatory governance, cultural renaissance, planetary awakening. It is truly presented as a definitive fork in the road.
In conclusion for this section, the idea is to begin seeing with clear eyes.
The sources argue that humanity is not meant to be ideological robots. We are meant to be pattern-seeing, meaning-making beings, capable of profound adaptation. Kalkiism, in this context, calls us to rise not by clinging to fixed beliefs, but by opening to truth, a truth that is observed, tested, lived, rather than merely inherited or declared. It's an invitation to fully embrace our capacity to become the intelligent, adaptable species we were born to be.
Now, let's turn our attention to the path to peace and dignity, designing a harmonious world. Our sources assert that true peace is not merely the absence of armed conflict, but a necessary foundation for the post-scarcity world. In an age of abundance, they claim, peace is not the byproduct, it is the operating system.
This is a fundamental redefinition of peace. It really is. It's not just about stopping bullets, it's about creating a holistic environment where conflict is structurally difficult to arise. True peace, they argue, requires that basic needs are universally met, justice is genuinely accessible to all, power is distributed equitably. They call this structural balance. Beyond that, it also requires an emotional climate where people feel safe, seen, heard, whole in their interactions.
And critically, as the sources emphasize, this kind of peace must start from within, described as peace as inner harmony.
Yes, the Kalkist framework insists we cannot have world peace until we have inner peace. And we cannot have inner peace if society is built on violence, be it economic, cultural, ecological, or spiritual. True peace, they suggest, emerges when an individual's actions, values, identity are aligned, stemming from a fundamental stillness that underpins thought and emotion.
And dignity is presented as the missing pillar of lasting peace. It's defined as the recognition of inherent worth in every being, independent of productivity or societal status.
Right. In the age of scarcity, dignity was often conditional tied to one's class, race, gender, profession. But in an age of abundance, the sources argue, this collapse of conditional dignity is inevitable and necessary. If human labor becomes largely optional due to automation, we cannot justly shame the jobless. If AI consistently outperforms humans in certain domains, human worth cannot be defined solely by utility. Dignity, they claim, must become unconditional. It must be the new default setting for society, or society itself will fracture under its own hypocrisy.
This explains the failure of peace without dignity. Our sources use historical examples like colonial peace, Pax Americana, or peace treaties implemented without addressing underlying injustices to show how such peace is always brittle.
Indeed. These historical examples, the sources demonstrate that imposing peace through coercion, military hegemony, or without genuinely addressing fundamental power imbalances and historical grievances, well, it always leads to fragility and eventual breakdown. True, lasting peace, as proposed by Kalkiism, emerges only when every being stands in the full light of their sacred dignity, not when elites declare a ceasefire.
The Kalki's framework, according to the sources, redefines peace into the 5 dimensions of peace. Let's walk through them. First, material peace.
This is defined as abundance without anxiety. It means universal access to essentials like food, shelter, healthcare, education, clean energy, with the aim of eliminating involuntary poverty. The sources emphasize, this is not charity, it is design, a fundamental restructuring of systems to guarantee well-being.
Then social peace.
This entails equity and belonging, the dismantling of all systemic hierarchies based on caste, race, gender, belief, alongside open and inclusive governance where all voices are genuinely reflected. Belonging, in this context, is framed as affirmation of one's unique identity, not forced assimilation.
Cognitive peace.
This means truth over propaganda. It describes an educational system that fosters genuine curiosity, media that rewards accuracy and integrity, algorithms that align with human flourishing rather than manipulation. Truth, in this vision, becomes a public utility, freeing minds from intentional distortion.
Ecological peace.
This is regeneration over extraction. It calls for the legal personhood of nature, widespread adoption of regenerative agriculture, cities designed to actively heal and integrate with the earth. The core tenet is that nature is not a resource, it is kin.
And finally, spiritual peace.
This dimension is about inner stillness and purpose. It envisions a world where meditation is a universal practice, silence is honored, spiritual practice is liberated from rigid dogma, allowing, as the sources put it, the soul has space to breathe.
So, how do we build this kind of peace? What's the practical architecture? Designing peace and dignity into systems, according to the sources. Let's start with education.
Education, they suggest, would be rooted in emotional literacy, empathy, ecological systems thinking, inner life practices. Conflict resolution and cooperative learning would be integrated from the earliest stages, transforming schools into sanctuaries, not factories, for rote learning.
And urban design?
Public spaces would be designed to foster interaction, beauty, natural flow. Housing would be abundant, modular, decommodified, ensuring shelter for all. Surveillance would be replaced with what they call mutual trust design, prioritizing community interaction over ubiquitous monitoring.
For governance.
Digital participatory systems would allow citizens to actively co-create policy in real time. Justice would be fundamentally restorative, not punitive. Political offices would be term-limited, transparent, spiritually accountable, transforming leaders into stewards, not rulers.
How do the sources suggest technology plays a role in this design?
Algorithms, they argue, would be consciously designed to optimize for well-being, not addiction or distraction. AI agents would support healthy dialogue and emotional regulation. Technology would respect user dignity, actively avoiding manipulation and surveillance capitalism, essentially becoming a therapist, not a tyrant.
And economics?
Value would be measured in care, not consumption. Work would be optional, contribution considered sacred. Everyone would receive a universal dignity dividend, not as welfare, but as inherent recognition of their existence. Markets, in this model, would explicitly serve people, not vice versa.
To achieve lasting peace, the sources emphasize the critical need for justice, reparation, and healing. This involves significant measures like reparations for historically colonized and oppressed communities, land returned to indigenous peoples, truth commissions, trauma-informed public policy.
Yes, it's about a forward-facing wholeness, building peace on the bedrock of reconciliation, not the erasure of past harms. The sources claim that only by acknowledging and actively healing historical wounds can a truly just and peaceful society emerge.
What's the role of spiritual practice in this proposed peace economy?
Meditation, they suggest, would become a public good, widely accessible, taught from a young age. Mindfulness integrated into daily life. Rituals of collective grief and celebration would be revived. This is framed as spiritual literacy, distinct from rigid religious rule, aiming to heal war not by forgetting it, but by transmuting it through inner work and collective ceremony.
This leads to the archetype of the warrior of peace, the Kalki archetype, not just slaying enemies, but dissolving illusion.
The sources describe the true warrior of peace in this context as one who destroys false beliefs, cuts through dogma, and stands against injustice, not with hate, but with fire. This archetype is presented as a protector of harmony, fierce in truth, soft in heart, unshakable in dignity, and every human, they suggest, is invited to embody this principle.
So Nepal, as the proposed pilot site for Kalkiism, could potentially become the first peace nation.
Yes. The sources suggest this due to Nepal's rich spiritual tradition, its relatively small size allowing for agile implementation, its history of resilience. The vision is of a Nepal where all citizens have access to dignity infrastructure, forests are rewilded, political conflict dissolves in a shared sacred vision. It could become a soft superpower of the spirit, a beacon of partnership rather than traditional power.
And art, music, and storytelling are highlighted as playing a vital role in building this peaceful culture.
They absolutely do. The Kalkiist framework promotes music that uplifts, art that honors the sacred, rituals of celebration and collective expression. The sources emphasize a peaceful society dances. Dignity is a drumbeat. Culture, they claim, is how peace and dignity are not just built into policy, but deeply felt and lived in daily experience.
Finally, what about children, the first citizens of peace?
In this envisioned future, the sources state, no child would fear hunger or violence, be shamed for curiosity, or molded to fit into an industrial machine. Every child would be met as a sacred being with unique genius. Peace is modeled, not just taught, creating playgrounds of cooperation and families rooted in radical presence. Children, in this view, become the very mirror of the future.
It sounds like the gentle revolution.
It's described as a design project, a moral compass, a revolution of gentleness. It calls for engineers who measure joy, politicians who truly listen, teachers who bless, and leaders who, as the sources elegantly put it, pray with data in one hand and poetry in the other. It's an age of gentle power and fierce compassion where the world is not owned, but profoundly beloved.
Now, let's explore a more challenging but equally critical aspect of this blueprint. When peace fails, prepare for war, protecting the future. Our sources acknowledge that the transition to abundance, as they envision it, will be resisted by vested interests and institutions built on inequality. Peace, it seems, can indeed be revolutionary.
It's presented as an unavoidable truth. Peace, when it's real and powerful enough to dismantle scarcity, directly threatens established power structures. The sources claim it invalidates weapons industries, collapses fear-based political narratives, and disrupts the profit models of media and surveillance. By ending the need for control and competition, true peace, they argue, threatens every empire. Therefore, Kalkiist societies, they posit, must prepare for this resistance, not out of paranoia, but out of foresight and wisdom.
This echoes what the sources identify as a historical pattern of suppressed peace. Figures like Socrates, Jesus, Buddha, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. were rejected by good citizens and respectable leaders.
Exactly. The pattern, they assert, is clear. Visionaries offer universal peace and liberation. Movements grow, then existing systems retaliate. Legal sabotage, disinformation, open violence. Peace, when it truly empowers, fundamentally threatens existing power structures. Thus, Kalkiism, they suggest, must not only advocate for peace, but also actively cultivate mechanisms to protect it.
And this protection, according to the sources, needs to understand 21st century warfare, which broadens the definition beyond conventional physical conflict. What are these new forms of war?
The sources outline several. First, economic warfare, involving sanctions, debt traps, using weaponized currencies against nations adopting Kalkiist principles. Then, information warfare, employing disinformation campaigns, deepfakes, bot farms to discredit leaders, or so division, often spreading narratives like, it's a cult. Third, cyber warfare, attacking critical digital infrastructure like blockchain systems. Fourth, legal institutional war, utilizing weaponized lawsuits and regulatory sabotage to stifle emergent systems.
And what about what the sources describe as the most subtle form? Psychological spiritual warfare.
This is identified as the war for the soul, aiming to instill despair, apathy, division within peaceful movements, or to provoke reactive, aggressive behaviors that can then be used to discredit nonviolent resistance. Considered the most insidious form of conflict, targeting inner resilience.
So, who will resist the Kalkiist future? According to these sources, they are quite clear on this.
They identify several powerful groups: fossil fuel empires facing destabilization from free, abundant energy, surveillance states and authoritarian regimes resisting transparent, participatory governance, financial oligarchs actively fighting decentralized finance and dignity dividends, and religious extremists opposing a universal spiritual ethic that transcends rigid dogma. The sources clarify. Kalkiism does not target these groups, but it must outgrow and outlast them through its own inherent strength and design.
This means, as the sources propose, a new archetype is needed, the spiritual warrior. Their purpose is not to dominate, but to protect.
Their tools, the sources explain, are clarity, courage, compassion, coordination, and creativity. They are described as systems thinkers with hearts on fire, embodying a form of embodied peacekeeping. Think of a bodhisattva with protective resolve, or Arjuna guided by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. It's about wielding truth and defending Dharma without descending into vengeance or aggression.
This new age, then, requires a new kind of defense infrastructure. How do Kalkiist communities, according to these sources, protect their peace systems?
They build digital sovereignty through decentralized infrastructure, ethical AI firewalls. They cultivate media resilience via distributed journalism, fact-checking chains. Economic resilience is achieved through post-currency systems, local energy independence, emotional fortitude built through daily spiritual practices, trauma healing. And international solidarity is forged through peace pacts, civil society alliances. These systems, the sources suggest, must be strong, adaptive, resilient, yet subtle and non-aggressive.
So, when to fight? The Kalkiist framework is clear. It believes in defense, not aggression.
Force, they state, is a last resort, only justified when all peaceful options are exhausted, innocent life or planetary survival is truly at stake, and the ultimate aim is restoration, not domination. Even then, they emphasize, it must be approached with solemnity and grief, never glorified.
And defense isn't just for a formal military, it's about civilian mobilization for peace defense. Every citizen, they suggest, has a role.
Artists, they explain, create counter-narratives. Technologists secure networks. Healers tend to trauma. Diplomats build bridges. Youth lead movements for change. Every citizen is encouraged to be trained in emotional regulation, digital hygiene, peace systems, spiritual literacy. They are described as guardians of the dawn, prepared to protect the new world emerging.
This defense also includes preparing for the collapse of the old order, because parts of it, the sources predict, will implode.
Yes. Signs like currency devaluation, mass social protest, infrastructure failure are expected to accelerate. Kalkiist communities in this scenario must offer refuge without collapse, acting as a network of sanctuaries that can guide humanity through chaos without succumbing to it themselves.
This seems to connect to ancient prophecy and pattern, the end-time battle prophecies found in texts like the Mahabharata or Armageddon.
The sources interpret these prophecies not literally, but symbolically, as powerful metaphors for the perennial conflict between fear and love, control and trust, scarcity and abundance, ego and spirit. Kalki, in this sense, is understood as a force that dissolves illusion, allowing the new world to triumph not by physical conquest, but by awakening consciousness.
So the strategy for peaceful expansion is not conquest, but rather growing by piloting success, open sourcing knowledge, training trainers, forming spiritual alliances, using culture as bridge. It's like a mycelial network.
It's framed as a process of viral healing, organic growth. Expansion is through invitation, not imposition, ensuring adaptability and resilience. The core idea spreads organically, building a new world from the ground up rather than attempting to impose it from above through force.
In conclusion for this section, the sources urge us to stand ready, stand true. The age of abundance, they warn, arrives through resistance, challenge, and choice.
You will be tested, your values questioned, emerging systems may face attacks. But if you are prepared, spiritually, emotionally, strategically, the sources suggest you will become the field on which the new world is born. It's presented as a direct call to be a protector and steward of this new dawn.
We are now at a critical juncture in our deep dive, turning to resistance to the light, why many will reject Kalki. Our sources explain that when what they describe as truth, clarity, and consciousness arrive, they don't just comfort, they expose, demand, change everything. And as a result, they argue, many will reject it.
This is presented as a profound paradox. While we might naturally assume truth and light would be universally embraced, the sources note that this isn't how deep transformation typically works. This light, as they describe it, threatens false power, fragile identity, unquestioned narratives, hidden trauma. It reveals the unearned, the unexamined, the untrue. For many, this level of exposure is profoundly uncomfortable, leading to resistance, even from individuals who might consider themselves well-meaning, educated, or spiritual.
And this resistance, the sources emphasize, is rooted in deeply ingrained historical patterns of rejection. Figures like Socrates, Jesus, Buddha, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. were all, they note, rejected. And crucially, not by monsters, but by good citizens, religious people, and respectable leaders.
This recurring pattern, the sources argue, clearly demonstrates that powerful truths inevitably challenge the status quo, and existing systems often retaliate. Each of these figures, bringing a profound clarity, was met with denial, suppression, even violence from those who feared the disruption of their comfortable realities or established power structures. It's a testament to the unsettling nature of radical truth.
What's the psychology of resistance at play here, according to these sources?
Our sources highlight several key psychological factors. First, identity clinging. People construct their identity around nationality, religion, class, career, even past trauma. When Kalkiism's proposed truths challenge these deeply held structures, it can be experienced as a form of personal or even existential death. Then there's cognitive dissonance. When cherished beliefs are proven false or insufficient, the human mind, they suggest, often chooses denial or rationalization over the difficult process of reevaluation. Kalkiism, by challenging deeply seated myths like capitalist meritocracy, religious supremacy, patriarchal structures, colonial history, can feel profoundly destabilizing to existing mental models.
And trauma reflexes also play a significant part, according to the sources.
Yes. Past betrayals, experiences of abuse, or encountering false prophets can lead people to reflexively associate new visions with danger. When the concepts associated with Kalki arrive, whether literally or symbolically, individuals might reject the message due to the pain or distrust it reactivates, trying to protect themselves by closing off from what might be new truths. This understandable reflex, however, is something the sources argue must be healed for humanity to progress.
So even institutional resistance will come from what the sources term the gatekeepers of the old world. What about religious institutions specifically?
The sources posit that Kalki's teachings, as they interpret them, will not come with the approval of many existing theological structures. They suggest his proposed universal teachings could undermine exclusivist doctrines, potentially unite diverse spiritual paths, offer direct spiritual access beyond traditional priesthoods. For many clerics and established religious hierarchies, this could be perceived as blasphemy, heresy, or a source of chaos as they fear the loss of their monopoly on spiritual truth.
And academia.
Academics, priding themselves on rigorous skepticism and empirical evidence, may dismiss a vision rooted in spiritual scripture, prophecy, intuition as pseudoscience or cultism. The sources remind us that while intellectual rigor is vital, these institutions sometimes overlook that the deepest truths can also arise from direct experience and intuitive insight, not solely from peer-reviewed journals.
Governments will also resist, according to the
The
sources.
sources suggest that Kalki's proposed societal shifts won't seek permission from existing state structures. They won't neatly fit into traditional left or right political binaries, and they could directly threaten corrupt leaders, surveillance states, what the sources call false democracies. His followers, even if peaceful, might be labeled terrorists, separatists, or radicals, simply because their existence challenges centralized power and control.
And media.
Corporate media, the sources contend, often thrives on division, conflict, spectacle. A message of unity, abundance, stillness, as proposed by Kalkiism, could be distorted, mocked, or simply ignored until the shift becomes undeniable. They assert that media will distort him, mock him, ignore him.
Even some of those who consider themselves awakened or part of the New Age movements may resist, due to what the sources call spiritual ego.
Yes, individuals deeply invested in their personal spiritual paths, yoga, tantra, Zen, others, may reject a new synthesis that includes but also transcends their current understanding. The sources suggest there can be guru competition if Kalki draws significant attention. And crucially, there's the risk of bypassing, where individuals mistake neutrality or a superficial all is love for genuine evolution, avoiding necessary confrontation with injustice. The sources warn that peace without justice is surrender.
This also challenges the myth of progress, causing even some progressives to resist.
Many progressives, the sources argue, hold a belief in a steady, linear march toward justice, thinking technology alone will solve problems or existing politics are reformable. Kalkiism, by proposing a full reset or a radical departure, can feel too radical or too spiritual for them. They might dismiss it, saying too much, too fast, too mythic, even as the world faces accelerating crises.
At the heart of this resistance, the sources claim, is the seduction of control.
Humans, they explain, often crave a world they can manage, dominate, predict. Kalkiism's core message, you are not in control, you are in flow, can feel like a form of death to the ego, which fiercely clings to its illusion of power. The ego, fearing this surrender, might, they suggest, rather destroy the future than surrender its illusion.
And past experiences with false messiahs and fear of deception can make people reflexively reject what is proposed as Kalki.
Many have indeed been disillusioned by false prophets, cults, movements that promised transformation but ended in harm. This trauma can lead people to view the Kalki concept as too good to be true or a trap, protecting themselves by closing off to new truths. This understandable reflex, the sources argue, is a wound that must be healed for humanity to embrace authentic transformation.
But paradoxically, the sources point to the hidden benefit of rejection, that it sharpens the message and forges inner clarity.
Resistance, while often painful for those attempting to enact change, is presented as useful. It can, they claim, reveal hidden ego within the movement itself, filter out opportunists, and strengthen the resolve and clarity of those who remain truly committed. Kalki, in this view, doesn't need mass approval. What is needed is integrity and alignment.
So what Kalki offers that the world fears, according to these sources, is a very direct, uncompromising truth.
The sources propose that Kalki offers truth without compromise, peace without submission, technology with soul, spirituality without dogma, abundance with justice, power without ego. This is presented as terrifying to existing systems, ingrained mental models, fragile identities, yet the sources unequivocally call it the medicine humanity desperately needs for its next stage of evolution.
How then should individuals respond to resistance, according to the Kalkiist framework?
The guidance is clear. Do not react with violence. Instead, clarify, do not convert. Don't explain your worth, embody it, stay in service, and, crucially, accept the long arc, understanding this is not a quick win, but a centuries-long transmission of consciousness.
The sources envision the great reveal, where eventually systems will collapse, illusions will break, and those who once mocked may return with tears.
At that point, the message conveyed in the sources for those aligned with Kalkiism is, forgive them, embrace them, say you are not late, you are home. It's about compassionately welcoming those who, through the unfolding of events, eventually come to see the truth.
Ultimately, the conclusion for this section is, truth is not democracy. Grace is not majority rule. The light, the sources claim, is inevitable.
The call to action for the listener is to shine anyway, speak anyway, build anyway, love anyway, because they are part of this unfolding dawn. And this light, they claim, does not need permission, only dedicated keepers. This steadfastness in the face of rejection is presented as essential for the new age to manifest.
Let's turn our attention to a truly profound aspect of this transformation presented in the sources, the death of false religions and the survival of Sanatana Dharma. The sources declare that Kalkiism's dawn means the dissolution of the false spiritual architectures that have long dominated human consciousness.
This assertion is not presented as an attack on faith itself. Not at all. Rather, it's framed as a critical distinction between what they call authentic eternal spirituality, what in Sanskrit is called Sanatana Dharma, and the constructed, corrupted systems that masquerade as religion. It challenges the notion that any system creating fear, division, dogma, guilt, or dependency is a false religion, regardless of its antiquity or popularity.
So, before discussing what these sources deem false religion, what's their definition of the purpose of true religion?
At its core, true religion, or genuine spirituality they propose, aims to reconnect the individual with the divine source, to harmonize life with cosmic law, to awaken the inner self as divine, foster universal compassion, and liberate the soul from suffering. Any system genuinely facilitating these aims, they argue, is aligned with Sanatana Dharma.
How then do the sources explain that false religions were born? They suggest they were engineered by empire and patriarchy, colonialism and control, losing their soul when divine revelation is captured, organized, and weaponized.
The sources trace a pattern. A mystic experience is profound inner realization, teaches universal principles. But after their death, followers may institutionalize the movement. Clergy arises. Sacred texts are canonized, heresies defined. The organized religion often becomes intertwined with state power or conquest. Dogma, they claim, replaces direct living experience, often leading to conflict. These false religions, in their view, become built on rigid textual authority, fear-based morality, exclusivity, often seeking to convert, conquer, condemn those outside their fold.
What are the specific features of false religions that these sources use to distinguish them from living Dharma?
They exhibit exclusivity, claiming only one true path to God. They often involve a centralization of authority in a hierarchical priesthood. They rely on fear-based morality, distorting the concept of the divine into a punitive tyrant. There's often profound gender suppression, reflecting patriarchal structures. They're used for colonial use, justifying atrocities in the name of conversion or divine mandate. And they often involve a denial of inner experience, gatekeeping direct divine realization. The sources state unequivocally, Sanatana Dharma rejects all of this.
So, what exactly is Sanatana Dharma in the context of these sources?
It means eternal order, or cosmic law. It's described not as a single religion, but as a civilizational ethos. It's polycentric, meaning multiple centers of truth, non-dogmatic, adapting rather than fixing beliefs, cyclical in time, recognizing patterns of rise and fall, integrative of body, mind, and soul, embracing all aspects of human experience, and celebratory of nature, femininity, and divinity in all forms. Crucially, they emphasize, it has no central scripture, no single central figure, no concept of original sin, no final prophet. Its essence is Dharma-right action and moksha liberation of consciousness.
And despite centuries of attempts by various empires to suppress or erase it, the sources argue why Sanatana Dharma cannot die.
Because, they claim, it is not a system, it is a symbiosis. It adapts. It lives not just in text, but in folklore, daily rituals, language, music, deeply embedded in the fabric of daily life. The sources assert you cannot destroy what is not centralized. You cannot kill what is cosmic. It simply cannot be eradicated like an organized institution or political movement.
And what is Kalki's specific role in all of this in relation to the collapse of false religions?
The sources state that Kalki is not here to create a new religion. He is here to restore Sanatana Dharma as planetary truth. They claim he dissolves exploitative priesthoods and fear-based beliefs, awakening direct access to the divine within and universal compassion. False religions, in their view, will resist and condemn this, but they cannot survive the age of truth because their rituals will ring hollow, their followers will inevitably seek something more authentic and real.
This resonates with what the sources call the global echoes of Sanatana Dharma that we already see in the world.
Indeed, concepts like yoga, meditation, karma, Ayurveda, the sacred sound of these dharmic ideas are, as the sources point out, pervasive globally, often adopted without explicit knowledge of their source or full context. The sources refer to this phenomenon as civilizational rebalancing, suggesting the West is starving for what Sanatana Dharma offers: inner silence, spiritual ecology, a more integrated approach to life. It does not demand conversion, it simply receives seekers, they conclude.
And what about the feminine returns? The sources assert that false religions often suppress the divine feminine, but Sanatana Dharma, they note, embraces goddesses and Shakti.
The sources predict that the sacred feminine will return to leadership not in opposition to the masculine, but in union, ultimately collapsing patriarchal theology and structures. This is presented as a non-negotiable and essential aspect of the unfolding age of abundance, crucial for planetary balance and wholeness.
So is this about interfaith dialogue or Dharma convergence?
Kalkiism, as presented in these sources, invites a convergence around Sanatana Dharma as a shared field of truth beneath all paths. It suggests seeing figures like Jesus or Mohammed through a dharmic lens as expressions of universal wisdom. While institutional religions may resist, fearing syncretism or crying heresy, the sources confidently state that the youth will see through it, drawn to deeper unifying truths.
What is the role of India in this spiritual future according to the sources?
India, they explain, holds the DNA of Dharma, with its deep pluralism and rich mythology, offering crucial insights for planetary healing. However, they emphasize that India must first decolonize its own mind by shedding internal divisions like caste hierarchies, religious nationalism, ritual rigidity. Only then, they argue, can it genuinely offer Sanatana Dharma to the world as service, not superiority, becoming a sacred lab for Dharma in action.
And how do the sources suggest false religions die?
They claim they die in irrelevance. The sources describe it as a quiet process leading to sudden collapse. Empty churches, youth walking away, dogma outpaced by scientific understanding, morality exposed as hypocrisy. People, they say, will leave in search of living water, finding it in simpler, direct forms of spiritual connection, breath, silence, nature, expressive arts. They conclude that Dharma rises not by attack, but by invitation.
So in conclusion for this section, it's about the resurrection of the eternal. Kalki, they say, comes to burn away illusion.
What remains, the sources propose, is Sanatana Dharma, the rhythm of the cosmos, the wisdom of sages and forests. They clarify, it's not a Hindu future, it is a dharmic one. It is not about religion, it is about reality. Kalki in this framework awakens the temple within, ensuring that when the false structures fall silent, the eternal truth will sing.
We've reached a truly profound section in our sources. Lord God is here, the divine roadmap to peace and prosperity. The sources declare a seismic shift of divine presence, stating that Lord God is here, incarnated, as they put it, in this time, in this body, on this earth. This isn't presented merely as belief, but as a potential direct encounter, fundamentally changing everything by rebooting reality and initiating a global roadmap.
This is indeed an assertion of the Avatar's presence within the source's framework, signaling the end of what they call Kali Yuga and the beginning of a profound global roadmap for transformation. It implies that spiritual authority is no longer theoretical, but embodied, humanity directly invited into a post-dualistic civilization. This time, the entire planet, they suggest, is involved, marking what they see as the final act of a 5,000-year cosmic cycle.
What do the sources claim happens when God incarnates? They outline 4 stages of transformation catalyzed by this presence.
First, the exposure of corruption. Lies and illusions are said to disintegrate, revealing widespread hypocrisy. Second, the gathering of souls. Truth seekers form communities of light, what they term the Sangha of Kalki. Third, the rewriting of systems. Economy, governance, education, media, energy, food systems are all redesigned under what they describe as divine guidance. And fourth, planetary redemption. As truth anchors, collective karma lifts, the climate stabilizes, and the Satya Yuga, or Age of Truth, dawns.
Why do these sources claim humanity needs a divine roadmap? It seems they suggest human-led reform has reached its limits.
Exactly. They argue that politicians serve capital, climate pacts fail, movements fragment. Society, they contend, is saturated with cynicism, technology continues to outpace ethics, leading to potentially destructive outcomes. Humanity, in their view, no longer needs merely better strategies, but a revelation of alignment, a divine governance that is theomorphic design, meaning it directly reflects reality itself, with only the source, as they define it, can provide.
And this roadmap, as laid out in the sources, has a clear structure with 5 interwoven domains.
These are the spiritual foundation, economic transformation, governance reformation, ecological regeneration, and cultural renaissance. Each domain, they emphasize, is critical and deeply interconnected for this proposed planetary shift, forming a cohesive vision for a new civilization.
Let's begin with the spiritual foundation, Dharma reinstated.
Peace, they claim, is impossible without this. Kalki's roadmap, as presented, reestablishes Sanatana Dharma as the moral and energetic infrastructure for society. This means, they propose, replacing fear-based religion with truth-based awakening, honoring all genuine spiritual paths, restoring feminine spiritual leadership, mainstreaming meditation, re-establishing sacred geography. The outcome envisioned is a society where the divine is not worshipped from afar, but lived from within by individuals.
Then economic transformation, from survival to sufficiency.
The economy, in this model, is built on contribution, not competition. This includes implementing a universal dignity dividend as a birthright for every individual, not based on labor but on their sacred existence. They envision post-capitalist systems displacing scarcity-based profit, local regenerative production becoming the norm, time sovereignty where no one is forced to labor for survival. Spiritual wealth metrics measuring joy, healing, wisdom would, they propose, replace currency as the primary indicators of prosperity. The outcome is an economic model that reflects divine generosity.
Moving to governance reformation, from power to presence.
Politics in this framework transforms into sacred stewardship. Innovations include participatory digital democracy with AI-facilitated citizen councils, leaders trained in Dharma, truth commissions to address historical grievances, and a shift from traditional policing to no police, only protectors, peacekeeping forces trained in trauma healing and nonviolent resolution. They also envision a global Dharma council. This, they claim, leads to a governance model that reflects divine wisdom.
And ecological regeneration, Earth as temple.
This calls for the full restoration of Earth as a conscious, living being. It involves legal personhood for nature, returning land to indigenous stewardship, sacred agriculture avoiding harmful chemicals, circular energy systems, widespread rewilding. The ultimate outcome, they suggest, is humanity in harmonious service to Earth as Gaia Devi, or the Divine Mother Earth.
Followed by cultural renaissance, beauty as divine instruction.
A civilization aligned with the divine, they propose, must sing again. This means poetry serving as living scripture, music acting as medicine, dance as public prayer, ancient myths re-embodied in modern forms. Artists in this vision would channel divine transmission, and art itself would become the language of planetary healing.
This roadmap also requires a profound personal transformation, becoming the people of Kalki.
It's an inner shift, the sources explain, where individuals aligned with truth, embody dignity, serve with love, lead without ego. Spiritual transformation is no longer presented as optional. It becomes, they claim, the new citizenship. Only individuals who undergo this awakening will be truly capable of building and sustaining this new world.
The sources suggest the first steps for this roadmap are to be taken in Nepal as the seed.
Nepal is identified as the sacred seedbed for prototypes of Kalkist villages, distributed energy systems, peace councils, youth education programs. As Nepal successfully implements these models, they propose, becomes a fractal model for global replication across Africa, South America, indigenous lands worldwide.
But the sources also anticipated opposition to this roadmap.
Yes, they expect resistance from global elites fearing loss of control, religious leaders fearing loss of monopoly, governments fearing decentralized order, intellectuals fearing the mystical elements. Their accusations, the sources claim, will simply reveal only their own attachment to illusion as the world awakens to new truths.
The sources even provide a timeline of transformation 2025-2035 with specific phases and milestones.
It envisions Nepal's pilot deepening from 2025-2026, leading to global recognition of new economic metrics and the collapse of old institutions from 2027-2028. Kalki stones are predicted to emerge in 20-plus nations from 2029-2032, and finally, global adoption and an intercontinental alliance for Dharma from 2033-2035.
And to help actualize and guard this roadmap, the sources introduce the Kalki Sena, the Army of Light.
This is described as a network of luminous servants who carry no weapons, only vision, courage, and love. Their roles, they suggest, include training peace builders, protecting transformation centers, holding energetic frequency, mentoring youth, facilitating trauma healing. Their motto, "We rise for the world that rises."
In conclusion for this section, the sources present this roadmap as from map to manifestation.
It's not abstract. It's portrayed as being drawn in real time.
Yeah.
By you. The divine presence, as described in these sources, calls us not merely to worship, but to actively build, co-create, harvest what has already begun. It's an invitation to recognize that individuals were born for this age and to walk the roadmap now.
We've arrived at a powerful and direct call to action within our source material. There are only two sides now. Join the Kalki Sena. The sources assert that humanity has reached a tipping point where neutrality becomes impossible.
Yes, The sources argue that the battle between what they define as light and darkness, abundance and scarcity, is here, alive, in every choice. The old world, often referred to as the Kali Yuga, is, in their view, crumbling under the weight of its contradictions: ecological crisis, economic instability, spiritual decay. Simultaneously, new systems are emerging. This convergence, they claim, creates a clear fork in the road. You cannot both serve the old and embrace the new. Neutrality in this context is deemed passive support for decay.
So let's look at how the sources define the two sides as overarching forces or worldviews. What characterizes side one, the world of Kali Yuga?
It is described as being fueled by fear, greed, and competition. It is, they claim, built on hierarchies of race, class, gender, wealth, controlled by corporations, what they term false religions, corrupt political systems. Its focus, they argue, is obsessed with consumption, distraction, violence, and is fundamentally spiritually blind, worshiping power, not truth.
What about side two, the world of Kalki?
This side, as described in the sources, is fueled by love, service, and creative abundance. It is built on equality, dignity, collective wisdom, guided by spiritual clarity and ethical technology. Its focus is on healing, regeneration, inner awakening, and it is spiritually awake, recognizing divinity in all beings. The sources contend you cannot genuinely serve both. Choosing the new is presented as choosing to rise with the age of Kalki.
So what is the Kalki Sena then? The sources are clear it's not a conventional army or military organization.
Absolutely not. It carries no weapons of violence, seeks to conquer no lands. It's described as a living network of light-bearers, individuals and communities who stand for truth, live by principles of abundance, protect and expand the blueprint, serve humanity's awakening. It's presented as a sacred order, open to anyone who chooses to serve this vision of the future, regardless of their background or current circumstances.
And the mission of the Kalki Sena is threefold, according to the sources.
First, protection of truth, countering disinformation, defending Dharma-aligned projects. Second, building the new, actively creating Kalkiist villages, economies, technologies, serving as living role models. And third, spiritual awakening teaching practices, spreading the ideas of Kalkiism, supporting personal transformation globally.
How is the structure of the Kalki Sena organized, as described in the sources?
It operates through circles, not pyramids, emphasizing self-organizing local groups, decentralized leadership. There are roles, not ranks, like guardians of knowledge, builders of abundance, keepers of spirit, messengers of light, defenders of justice, each role considered sacred. And it explicitly leverages technology as ally, utilizing AI, blockchain, decentralized networks for coordination and resilience.
So how to join isn't about filling out paperwork, is it?
No. The sources suggest it's a profound inner choice to live by truth, serve abundance, honor all life, build rather than consume, forgive rather than hate. It's about stepping into alignment with these principles, they claim, without waiting for external permission or formal induction.
And this choice requires the inner work of the Kalki Sena.
Members, according to the sources, commit to daily spiritual practice, self-inquiry, compassionate service, or siva, continuous learning, fostering strong community care. The core principle is clear. The Kalki Sena is not about fighting others. It is about transforming ourselves so we can transform the world.
But choosing to align with this vision, the sources warn, comes with significant challenges.
Yes, you can, they suggest, expect resistance from friends, family, wider society, who may misunderstand, mock, or actively oppose your choices. Old habits of fear and comfort will tempt you back. But Kalkiism in this context teaches that every test is a teacher, serving to sharpen your resolve, clarify your purpose, deepen your compassion.
The sources even lay out the Sena's global vision 2025-2040 in three distinct phases.
Phase 1, 2025-2027, focuses on awakening and recruitment, ideas spreading, local Sena circles forming. Phase 2, 2028-2032, is building the blueprint, establishing Kalkiist villages, a global digital network. Phase 3, 2033-2040, is planetary shift, Sena expanding to millions globally, Kalkiist principles seeing widespread adoption alongside the predicted collapse of old systems.
And there are stories of the first Kalki Sena members that serve as templates for this vision.
Yes, the sources offer examples like the Nepali farmer building a regenerative farm hub, the Bangalore AI engineer designing open-source AI for community education, the former soldier running a trauma healing center based on nonviolence. These stories, they claim, illustrate how ordinary people are making extraordinary choices in alignment with this proposed future.
But the Sena, the sources claim, won't be without opposition.
Media, they predict, will misrepresent it as a cult. Politicians fear its nonpartisan truth. Corporations resist its ethical framework. Extremists accuse it of heresy. The sources, quoting Lord Krishna, assert this resistance is part of a divine manifestation, necessary friction for establishing Dharma.
This also involves preparing for the final phase, anticipating further economic collapse and climate migration.
The Sena, in this scenario, is envisioned to act as a network of sanctuaries, guiding humanity through chaos. This isn't presented as fear-mongering, but foresight, positioning the Sena not to fight an apocalypse, but actively participate in birthing renewal.
So for the listener, your role in the Kalki Sena is to ask, what is my gift? And to serve with love.
The sources emphasize, you do not need to be perfect, you need to be willing. The Sena, they claim, grows one awakened heart at a time, making it accessible to anyone truly committed to truth and service.
What's a day in the life of the Kalki Sena look like in these emerging hubs?
It's painted as a life of simplicity, service, joy. Daily collective meditation, shared meals from regenerative gardens, children learning wisdom uniquely, artists creating, engineers building for communities, elders guiding. It's a vision of harmonious, purpose-driven living.
The conclusion offered by the sources is a powerful one. The time to choose is now.
The choice, they assert, is imminent because the Earth cannot endure another century of exploitation under old paradigms. The invitation is open to choose truth over illusion, courage over fear, to actively build the future rather than passively watch it unfold or decline.
And now, let's explore what the sources describe as the new human being, 100x spiritual evolution. They claim the coming shift isn't just technological or economic, but entails the emergence of a new human being whose spiritual capacity will grow exponentially by what they estimate as a factor of 100 compared to today.
This isn't presented as poetic exaggeration, but as a measurable shift in perception, intuition, consciousness that, they claim, will define the age of Kalki. It's tied to Hindu cosmology, where Kalki ends Kali Yuga, the current age of darkness, and ushers in Satya Yuga, the age of truth. The ancient Parama Purana, cited by the sources, is quoted, "In the age of Kalki, even the lowest born will know Brahman," implying universal spiritual enlightenment, not just for a select few. Brahman being ultimate reality, universal consciousness.
So what does this 100x leap actually mean across our inner selves, according to this framework?
The sources outline a framework. First, 100x awareness, a baseline of calm, clear, expansive awareness, sensing subtle energies, perceiving realities, understanding thoughts as vibrations. They frame this as a return to our original nature, turiya, a state of pure consciousness.
Then 100x intuition.
Intuition becomes our primary compass, a refined inner technology. Individuals, they suggest, will feel which decisions align with Dharma, sense truth or lies with clarity, detect emotional wounds empathetically, navigating abundance with wisdom and speed.
What about 100x compassion?
This will be instinctive, born from direct experience of oneness, where exploiting others, they claim, would feel viscerally wrong, like harming one's own body. Joy would naturally come from helping others awaken, not domination, fundamentally rewiring economics and relationships based on empathy.
And 100x creativity.
Creativity, the sources propose, becomes the main form of human labor, channeling from higher realms, work experienced as ecstatic service, seva, inner alignment effortlessly manifesting as outer beauty and innovation.
Finally, 100x integration.
This means embodying the divine within the physical. It's presented as a new model siddha rather than sannyasi. Siddhas are perfected beings living in society, engaging, loving, building, creating, not in isolation, but fully integrated, while sannyasis often denote renunciates. This transformation, the sources claim, aligns with ancient prophecies, new confirmations across various spiritual traditions. The Vishnu Purana on Kalki's elimination, Christianity, Joel 2.28, describing pouring out my spirit, Buddhism on Maitreya's direct teachings, Sufism law mentioning al-insan al-kamil, the perfect human.
So is there a science of awakening that supports this 100x leap, according to these sources?
Yes. They argue modern science is beginning to confirm ancient spiritual wisdom. Meditators access alpha, theta, gamma brainwave states, correlating with increased empathy, creativity, neurofeedback. Certain entheogens, they suggest, provide scaffolding for spiritual evolution, accelerating these shifts.
And epigenetics is mentioned as well.
Indeed. Inner work, the sources contend, can change gene expression. They pose a powerful question. Imagine what 100 million people doing daily meditation could do to the human species over 2 generations. We're not just changing minds, we are evolving DNA. This speaks to potential collective, accelerated human evolution.
And ironically, AI as mirror can even help facilitate spiritual growth in this proposed future.
Yes. As machines handle more routine work, humans are freed to explore consciousness. AI, used ethically, could personalize practices, translate texts, connect seekers globally, potentially acting as a mirror for awakening when wisely implemented.
So what's the path of the new human, the practical practices and disciplines for cultivating this 100x capacity?
The roadmap includes daily silence, mantra and breath, used as vibrational codes, service, seva, to dissolve ego and cultivate compassion, community satsang for exponential growth through collective practice, and consistent study and integration of diverse wisdom traditions.
And social systems for 100x beings must adapt. How does education transform?
Centered on emotional intelligence, creativity, spiritual literacy,
Mm-hmm.
no grades, meditation as core subject.
What about health?
Healing, understood as energy flow, integrating diverse wisdom, focus on prevention, holistic alignment,
And governance?
decisions by councils of clarity, citizens voting on dharmic grounds, right action, cosmic alignment, restorative justice.
Finally, economics for 100x beings.
Value measured by contribution to awakening, work as creative offering, resources flow toward healing, beauty, wisdom, not just profit. This transformation, while presented as inevitable, also faces obstacles: addiction to comfort, institutional control, the fear of unknowing. Kalkiism, they claim, teaches you are not becoming less, you are becoming everything.
And love, death, and rebirth are presented as the final tests individuals face daily.
These sacred tests involve loving opponents, letting the old self die, living as the new, awakened self without compromise, the sacred fire through which individuals become luminous.
What about the children of the Kalki age?
Described as already tuned to the new frequency, rejecting hypocrisy, demanding truth. Sources advocate new educational communities like forest schools, temple labs to protect their clarity, embodying the future.
This also marks the return of the sacred body.
Kali Yuga often saw the body as sinful. Kalki Age sees it as an instrument of divine play. Even physical acts as sacred energy, food as vibrational fuel, movement as prayer, celebrating embodiment, not ascetic withdrawal.
And this 100x leap, the sources suggest, could even lead to a new species.
In a spiritual sense, yes. Not genetic engineering, but spiritual convergence. Biological beings with profound divine consciousness, no longer trapped by ego or linear time. They will be us, fulfilled, humanity realizing its divine potential.
In conclusion, the sources suggest this transformation is about becoming what we already are.
The 100x transformation isn't something external to achieve, but something we remember, an innate capacity reawakened. The age of Kalki is not imposing something new, it is lifting the veil of illusion. The call is meditate, serve, speak truth, protect innocence, build beauty, join hands, become the new human, not someday, now.
We've now reached the final major section of our deep dives, spreading the flame from Nepal to the world. Our sources frame Nepal as the unexpected corner, where what they describe as the great transformation of the 21st century begins, the ideal seedbed.
This selection isn't arbitrary. Nepal is described as a sacred land, long dormant, known for its profound spiritual history. Kailash, Buddha's birthplace, Sanatana Dharma, Buddhism, shamanism coexisting. Despite economic challenges, its spiritual soil, they claim, is alive, prepared for a new flowering, like volcanic ash enriching earth for new growth.
And it's considered a small country with global resonance for this purpose.
Exactly. Nepal is small enough for agile transformation, allowing rapid implementation and iteration on a manageable scale. Yet, with 30 million plus population, it's large enough for global relevance. Its success, if Kalkiism works there, lifting communities, healing divisions, proves the model for other nations. Bhutan, Sri Lanka, African nations, indigenous regions. It aims to transform Nepal into a replicable template.
So what is the pilot? Designing the Kalki's project in Nepal, then. What's its core premise?
To establish Nepal as a living laboratory, the pilot aims to build a new economic system based on post-scarcity abundance, integrate spiritual practices into governance, eradicate extreme poverty in specific districts, and prototype systems that can replace capitalism where it has reached its limits. A holistic design project.
And how is it geographically structured?
Not a national mandate, but launching in 3 to 5 selected districts, chosen for poverty rates, community networks, spiritual openness, local leadership willingness. These zones are envisioned as Kalki Commons, protected areas where new systems can grow and be tested.
And the proposed institutional structure?
A people's assembly representing local communities, a council of designers, theorists, spiritual teachers, technologists translating vision, and a global advisory network linking Nepal with international allies. All three working in rhythm, inner vision, outer design, practical implementation.
Let's talk about the economic framework, post-scarcity in practice. What's the universal dignity dividend, UDD?
Defined as not a basic income, but a dignity income. Every adult receives a baseline dividend, not because they are poor, but because they are divine. This, they claim, fundamentally shifts economic psychology from survival to contribution and purpose.
And work as worship cooperatives.
Local production, farming, services organized as sacred cooperatives. Profits shared equitably. Meetings begin with spiritual invocation. Success measured not just financially, but by transparency, non-competition, adherence to Dharma.
What are karma credits in this unique model?
Instead of interest-bearing debt, a karma ledger tracks acts of selfless service, redeemable for communal resources like housing, learning, retreats. They don't expire or create pressure. They build community capital based on contribution. Karma, meaning cause and effect, selfless action, creates positive returns.
And energy and food abundance zones.
Significant investments in solar microgrids, vertical farms, advanced water capture ensure essentials are decommodified. The principle: no one should pay for sunlight, clean water, or food staples in the new paradigm.
This all sounds like a truly spiritual framework, a civilization of consciousness. How are Dharma-centered schools designed?
They make meditation, mantra core curriculum, teaching Sanskrit, logic, interfaith harmony, valuing creativity and holistic development over rote obedience, competitive grading.
What are community awakening hubs?
Sacred civic centers serving as temples, digital labs, healing spaces, hosting daily breathwork, yoga, dialogue for the community.
And interfaith harmony initiatives.
Guided by Kalki's teachings that all genuine paths lead to the same light. Includes a council of prophets from major traditions meeting regularly to foster unity, shared wisdom.
Finally, temple tech, sacred tech integration.
Seamless merging of tech with spiritual practice. Apps for personalized practices, AI chatbots trained on sacred texts for guidance, blockchain for transparent karma accounting, all serving inner and outer harmony.
So, governance and justice in the Kalkiist model are also deeply grounded in Dharma. What are liquid democracy platforms?
Citizens vote on issues in real time via secure digital platforms, guided by spiritual education, open debate. No parties, only proposals and wisdom scores, informing collective decisions.
And restorative justice tribunals.
Crime treated not as violation against state, but wounded Dharma disruption of cosmic order. Focus shifts to healing all parties, offender, victim, community, rather than purely punitive measures.
What's the citizen caretaker role?
Every UDD recipient asked to take one caretaking role: elder support, forest tending, teaching, spiritual mentoring, fostering mutual responsibility.
And provocatively, no police, only protectors.
Trained spiritual warriors, like historical Shaolin monks, replace militarized police. Nonviolence central. Force a last resort for restoration, never first response or control.
So if GDP and profit are obsolete, what are the metrics of success? 7 sacred metrics.
Beyond GDP. Awakened Consciousness Index, Dignity Quotient, Communal Harmony Index, Abundance Flow Ratio, Creativity Participation Rate, Service Hours Per Capita, Joy Incidence Curve. Not soft metrics, but the heart of the new civilization, measuring genuine flourishing.
How is spreading the flame, the strategy for global rollout, envisioned?
A ripple strategy. Influence spreads from Nepal's diaspora to other nations, global cities. Open source everything: frameworks, code, curriculum for replication, Kalkiist embassies in major capitals for spiritual diplomacy, research, training, an annual global summit, a ritual gathering to align planetary dharma.
But this radical movement will face challenges to expect.
Resistance from economic elites via media discrediting, legal interference, religious fundamentalists accusing of heresy, even internal purity tests within the movement, causing ego conflicts, countered by Kalki's training in humility service.
What's the role of diaspora, youth, and women in globalizing Kalkiism?
Nepali diaspora brings capital, visibility. Youth, disillusioned by materialism, trained in spiritual discipline, systems thinking. Women and the divine feminine emphasize for non-negotiable leadership, overseeing emotional integrity, care economics, ensuring balanced blooming, not masculine conquest.
And how does tech for the sacred future serve Kalkiism?
Decentralized platforms like Web3, power transparent voting, karma credits, AI plus scripture provides personalized spiritual guides, translators. Virtual satsangs and sacred metaverses create immersive environments for global communion. Tech, wielded with Dharma, is a powerful bridge.
The sources outline a clear timeline, a 21-year Kalkiist expansion plan.
Phase 1, years 1 to 7, local birth in pilot districts, establishing models.
Wow.
Phase 2, years 8 to 14, regional bloom, national policy shift, global allies join. Phase 3, years 15 to 21, planetary radiance, Kalki's zones in 100-plus nations, widespread adoption.
The conclusion for this section is powerful. The flame is lit.
Kalkiism presented as a practical spiritual system for a changing world. The flame, they claim, is lit in Nepal. Listeners urged to protect it, feed it, spread it, a call to be worthy, actively help build this new age.
Well, we have certainly covered an incredible amount of ground today. Wow. From understanding how exponential technology, according to our sources, dissolves scarcity and exposes capitalism's limits, to exploring the emergence of Kalkiism as a comprehensive blueprint for an age of abundance, dignity, and spiritual awakening. It's truly a vision of a global movement like the Kalki Sena, actively building a new world.
And the central message, as these sources convey, is that this isn't some far-off theoretical dream. The dawn is not coming. The dawn is already here.
Yeah.
You, our listener, are, they suggest, not just a spectator, but a participant in the greatest shift of our era. The signs are everywhere. Solar energy's plummeting costs, AI's rapid advancements, rising global awareness of consciousness, ecological harmony, the undeniable cracks in old paradigms of capitalism and dogmatic religion.
So what does this mean for you practically, according to these sources? It means actively shifting from a mindset of accumulation to one of contribution. It means engaging in spiritual discipline, like daily meditation, as a path to inner clarity. It involves building communities that genuinely cook, learn, heal, and serve together. And it means practicing digital dharma, using technology as a tool for liberation and connection, not addiction or surveillance. Your every conscious choice, they suggest, holds profound significance.
The deepest truth, according to the sources, is this. The dawn is not outside of you. You are the dawn. Your breath is the trumpet. Your presence is the signal. Your life is the arrival. This isn't about waiting for someone else or a future event to unfold independently. It's about recognizing that the shift has already begun within and around you and that you are an integral part of its manifestation.
So we challenge you, our listeners, to consider what this might mean for your own life and to go forth, build it, not someday, now.